First, we're going to start off with a basic problem. You have to simplify it. First, you're going to multiply the coefficients, which are 2 and 2, and then you multiply the i's. Just treat the i's as variables, but just like x or y, it just has a set of values. So, first you do the coefficients, then you get 4, and then I times I is I squared. But remember, our little chart. I squared is equal to -1, so it's really 4 times -1. And then simplify, and then you get -4.
An important concept working with imaginary numbers is being able to cancel out the I. So multiplying by the complex conjugate, in this case, it cancels out the second term. So in more of a basic level, here are two complex conjugates. When you multiply these out, the second term completely cancels out, and you just get x squared minus 9. It's the exact same scenario here. So when you multiply and distribute everything out, you get -4i plus 4i, and -4i plus 4i is really 0. So working further down, I squared is really -1, so -16 times -1 is really 16, and 36 plus 16 is 52. So it's important to realize that you've got a whole number instead of an irrational number with an imaginary in it.
Alright, simplify this harder problem. But first, you have to simplify the radicals into I. But here's a reminder.
Okay, here's a tip. So imagine that the square root of -169 is really just the square root of 169. And what is that? 13. So now you have to add back in the square root of -1. So 13 times the square root of -1 is really 13i, because the square root of -1 is really I.
Simplify the radicals. You get 9 plus 13i times 14 plus 8i. And then after you distribute out the binomials, you get 182i plus 104i squared plus 126 plus 72i. And just a reminder, the I squared is a -1. So then you would really get 182i plus 104i times -1 plus 126 plus 72i. And then after simplifying, you would get 254i minus 104 plus 126. And then after simplifying, you get 22 plus 254i. And just remember that you have to keep it in a plus bi form.
Okay, as previously stated, I is really the square root of -1, and you're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator. So in order to get I out of the denominator, you need to multiply by a factor of 1 that cancels out the I. So really, I times I is -1. So when you multiply out, you get 2i squared, which is really -1 times 2. And since you multiply by I on the top as well, you get 4i. But make sure you know that it can simplify even more, because 2 can go into 4. So you really get -2 times I.
Okay, so first you multiply the denominator by its conjugate because it gets rid of the second term. And here you would get 4 minus 8i over 1 minus 2i plus 2i minus 4i squared. And just remember, like I said before, it would cancel out the second term. And -2i plus 2i equals 0, so that cancels out. So then it gets to 4 minus 8i over 1 minus 4i squared. But as a reminder, I squared is actually just -1. So it's really 4 minus 8i over 1 minus 4 times -1, which in conclusion is 4 minus 8i over 5.
Now you're going to get a little bit of everything. So if you don't remember how to simplify when an imaginary number is raised to an exponent greater of 4, then here's a reminder. Okay, so you have I raised to the 7th. So what you do is you divide 7 by 4. And the reason you divide it by 4 is because on our cynical nature chart, it goes up to the 4th power. So when you divide it by 4, you have a remainder of 3. And the remainder of 3 is now your new exponent. So I raised to the 3 is really -I. Okay, so now since we know what I raised to the 7th is, which is I to the 3rd, and really -I, we can now simplify even more. So as we said before, since you can't have I in the denominator, you have to multiply by the complex conjugate. So in this case, it'll be 3 plus 2i. So you need to multiply that by in a form of 1, so you need to multiply the top as well. So you're going to get a result of 6i plus 4i squared, and the second term is going to cancel out. So now you're going to be left with this, and now that we know I squared is really -1, so the imaginary number is out of the denominator, so you simplify everything else, and you get 6i minus 4 all over 13.